There's no doubt about it, The Color Purple is one of the greatest films ever made. Not only is it one of the first major movies to feature a predominantly black cast, but it also tells a story that resonates with viewers to their very core. With its powerful story of women's empowerment, there are so many reasons why viewers fell in love with The Color Purple. With a powerful film like this, there's bound to be a few stories behind the scenes that will leave you surprised. Whether that's unexpected casting decisions or creative decisions, here are 20 weird facts you didn't know about The Color Purple. Number 20. The author of the book initially didn't like the movie. The very first fact on our list is surprising to say the least. It's not every day you find out that the author of a book initially hated the movie adaptation of their book. In this case, Alice Walker, the book's author, was horrified by the film's final cut. She was on set for much of the filming, but her initial reaction to the final cut wasn't what you would expect. Walker felt the film's ending was too focused on the redemption of the male characters and not enough on Celia's newfound independence. This is possibly any author's worst nightmare, seeing their book's vision not entirely captured on screen. Alice Walker was leaning toward a female empowerment direction, and the film's ending didn't reflect that. She also did not like the film's opening scene, and she was noted to have described it as an Oklahoma-type opening. However, watching the film at its premiere changed her opinion. She slowly warmed up to it and appreciated the film in a way she didn't the first time. This time she saw the film as a separate work of art, different from her book, but still managed to convey its powerful message. She also initially had strong reservations about the music score as she found it unsuitable, but with time, she grew to appreciate the film. Number 19. The casting choices were unique. The Color Purple had some interesting names attached from the very start. It was the feature film debut for major stars today, such as Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah Winfrey. The casting for this film was so unique and also highly anticipated. It was one of the A-list movies to star an all-black cast. So many actors and actresses were new to high-profile films. Some had already made a name for themselves. The auditions for the film had to be held under a code name. For example, Oprah got a call from Quincy Jones, asking her to audition for a movie called Moonsong. Even with the code name, Oprah knew it was The Color Purple. After 2 long months of waiting, there were no callbacks, and at some point, Oprah gave up on waiting and checked herself into a weight loss camp. Spielberg had to call her to tell her to leave immediately because the role required no weight loss. There were other big names associated with the casting choices. The role of Shug Avery was offered to Tina Turner, Lola Falana, and Diana Ross, but they all turned it down. Tina Turner had a very good reason to turn it down, she said. Mr. Albert reminded her of her mean ex-husband, Ike Turner. The last thing she needed was to relive Celie's life, so it was a role she couldn't possibly accept. Number 18. The Color Purple's snub at the Oscars was well thought out. People knew they would take home many wins when The Color Purple received 11 Academy Award nominations. However, unfortunately, they won 0 awards, which became a huge controversy. It remains one of the most controversial moments in the history of the Academy Awards because of how surprised audience members were by the snub. The film had the most nominations, but still had 0 wins. This was a record-breaking moment, and not in a good way. Many people wondered where the snub came from, and you would be shocked to find out that it came from many places, and it was more well thought out than you think. For one, black authors, filmmakers, feminists, and the NAACP accused the film of perpetuating harmful stereotypes of black men as violent. The white Academy voters who were not used to this type of controversy decided not to vote for the film. Their defense was their fear of backlash. They tried hard to avoid it by not voting for the film. However, avoiding it backfired, making the snub even more controversial. While the film lost at the Oscars, it was also a film that broke other positive records. It was the first feature film to feature 3 performances by black actors nominated for Academy Awards: Whoopi Goldberg for Best Actress, and Oprah Winfrey and Margaret Avery for Best Supporting Actress. Number 17. The separation scene was real. This scene isn't talked about enough, so this fact will probably leave you shocked. Remember the separation scene where Mr. drags Celia away from her sister? It was one of the most brutal scenes to film. The fact about it is that Spielberg was so determined to direct this scene in the most authentic and raw way possible. He gave the young actress playing Nettie one simple instruction: whatever you do, do not let Danny separate you. He then gave Danny Glover the opposite instruction, ensuring the scene was as real as possible. Ultimately, it paid off because this scene's physical violence and struggle are real. Aside from the instructions given to Glover, the actor took matters into his own hands to add to the raw layer of the scene. Danny Glover improvised the scene as well. There was a point where Danny pounded his fist on her hand and threw the rock at her. This wasn't part of the script. Danny Glover had gone all out, and unfortunately when he hit her hand, it hurt in real life. The scene was so scary and real, so Steven Spielberg was determined to do just one take per shot because he did not want the actors to go through the emotional trauma more than once. The scene and the rest of the film were made to be as authentic as possible. So, the raw emotion you see on screen is because of the actors' riveting performances and Spielberg's incredible directing skills. Number 16. There was such a difference between the book and the movie. If there's one thing about movie adaptations, it is that the movie opens itself up to being constantly compared to the source material. There is no surprise by now that there were many key differences between the book and the movie. However, there are some subtle differences that few fans might have missed along the way. In the book, Shug is known to be a rebellious woman who is free from the oppression of men. However, the film portrays her as vulnerable and desperate for her father's approval. Another significant difference between the book and the movie is how Mr. Albert is portrayed. In the book, he is a ruthless character who beats Celie whether Shug is around or not. The film portrays him as someone who puts on the nice guy act in front of her. In the book, after Celie finally leaves Albert, she focuses on her new life as a free woman. This is so much different from the film, which focuses heavily on Albert. The film portrays him as a suffering alcoholic who is supposed to gain the pity of the audience watching. This difference was what Alice Walker had a problem with. The author worried that the movie would turn into Mr. Albert's story instead of Celie's. Although the differences between the book and the film are shocking and weird, Steven Spielberg still created a masterpiece with a stellar cast. As a result, the film was able to have a fantastic impact on culture and the history of cinema. Number 15. Famous artists in the industry helped Quincy Jones figure out the music score. Quincy Jones is credited with the music score of The Color Purple, and he did a fantastic job in such a limited period of just 2 months after filming to put it all together. He doesn't take all the credit for it because it wasn't just his ideas alone, it was more of a collaborative effort. Quincy Jones wasn't afraid to ask for advice, which was precisely what he got. He was advised by several people in the music industry, including one of his good friends and one of the most prominent musical artists the world has ever seen, Michael Jackson. At the time, Michael Jackson regularly appeared on the set of The Color Purple, so he was the perfect person to seek advice from. Quincy Jones also had more names in his repertoire. Rod Temperton played a role in creating the music score for The Color Purple. Rod Temperton might not be a massive name drop like Michael Jackson, but he did write many songs behind Michael Jackson's hits. He wrote Thriller, Rock With You, and Off the Wall. To Quincy Jones, Rod Temperton was his secret weapon. He was behind some of the greatest hit songs the world had ever heard, and he sought his help as he should. Jones asked Temperton to help him develop the tunes for the juke joint scene, and he ended up writing Miss Celie's Blues for The Color Purple. Number 14. Quincy Jones found Oprah on a talk show. For a name as big as Oprah, it is hard to imagine a time when she wasn't the major star she is today. Taking a trip down memory lane, you will find that Oprah was made for her role on The Color Purple. She got this role because Quincy Jones pretty much discovered her. He had seen her as a local anchor on a TV show in Chicago, and he immediately knew she would make a great Sophia. At the time, Oprah was a talk show host on AM Chicago, so she had some unlearning to do when she was hired for the role. Oprah constantly looked directly into the camera while filming her scenes, which amused and frustrated Steven Spielberg all at once, and it was completely understandable because of her background. She was constantly on the edge of her seat, thinking she would get fired or, worse, be replaced. Jones and Spielberg never told her that her job was safe. They thought it would make her lose motivation. Fortunately, a new leaf turned during the dinner table scene. Spielberg thought outside the box and asked Oprah to express how she felt that day she saw Celie in the store, and Oprah went all out as she had lived all her lines, delivering a powerful and emotional performance. After this, Spielberg became even more confident in Oprah and added more scenes for her character. Number 13. Filming in the summer made things tricky. The Color Purple was filmed in the summer of 1985 in North Carolina. However, the story takes place in the rural area of Georgia and spans multiple seasons. This meant that clothing options were guided by the season changes of the storyline and not the real-life season they filmed in. At face value, this doesn't seem like a big deal, but weirdly, it meant the cast had to wear long-sleeved clothes even when the weather was burning up the atmosphere. Now, you might be wondering how they made the winter season happen. They didn't use fake snow. Instead, they used Epsom salt. The crew sprayed salt all over the land and houses for 2 days to make it look almost like a winter wonderland. The heat and the snow weren't the only things they had to worry about. They had other problems, such as the iconic purple flowers. The flowers they planted turned out to be more pink than purple. In today's age, this wouldn't have been much of a problem, but at that time they didn't have the digital effects we have today, so they had to move and work. They had to paint all the pink flowers purple to get the desired look. Number 12. Steven Spielberg almost didn't direct the film. This one fact will leave the wheels in your head going round and round. It's hard to imagine what The Color Purple of 1985 could have been without Steven Spielberg. It's also hard to imagine anyone but him in the driver's seat directing this film, but it would shock you to know that he initially turned down the offer. At the time, Spielberg felt he lacked the life experience to capture the story properly. He believed that a black director would have been a better choice for the film, and he thought the story needed a black director who would be more suited to telling the story of black struggle in the South. While Spielberg doubted he would be an excellent choice for the film, producer Quincy Jones had a completely different vision. Jones was sure that Steven Spielberg was the right person for the job. He famously asked Spielberg, "Did you have to be an alien to direct E.T.?" This was the question that Spielberg needed to hear. Through this one question and Jones's ability not to take no for an answer, he convinced Spielberg to take on the project. Spielberg became a whole new person. He began an extensive research period, studying black culture and Southern history to prepare for the film adequately. As it turns out, for Spielberg, The Color Purple wasn't just another project. It was an important stepping stone in his career that set him up for more serious films like Schindler's List. Number 11. The book was surprisingly explicit. When you think of The Color Purple, many things come to mind. However, the difference between the book and the movie is also worlds apart. This isn't a massive surprise because most film adaptations differ from the books they are based on. In this case, the differences seemed more deliberate than anything else. For one, the novel used vulgar and explicit language to describe the lesbian relationship between Celie and Shug Avery, which would have surely earned the film an R rating. However, Steven Spielberg decided to go in the opposite direction for the film. He wanted to make it more accessible to a broader audience and got precisely what he wanted. Instead of focusing on the explicit material of the book, he decided to focus on the emotional journey and the powerful inner strength of the characters. While he stuck to his guns when making this choice, he later admitted that the decision was a big mistake. He felt he lacked the courage at the time to fully portray the love between Celie and Shug, so the romance was mainly implied rather than fully portrayed. Number 10. Whoopi Goldberg's weird audition. Long before Whoopi Goldberg got her role in The Color Purple, she already had a connection to the work of art. Goldberg and her daughter were mega fans of the Alice Walker novel that they read aloud to each other on a road trip in their VW van. They were so moved by the story, so much so that Whoopi Goldberg wrote a letter to Walker, and in the letter, she famously declared that she would do anything to be in the film adaptation, even play dirt on the floor. While this was a unique way to get the author's attention, her audition blew it out of the park. Instead of doing a simple line reading, Goldberg performed a segment of her provocative one-woman stage production, The Spook Show. She did this before Steven Spielberg, Quincy Jones, and Michael Jackson. The routine she chose could only be defined as genius. It was a comedy set about E.T. getting arrested for illicit substance possession. It was a bold move as she satirized Spielberg's very own creation. She didn't only choose to be funny, she was fearless in her execution and showed a range of critical intelligence. She showed her audience that she could handle all the layered complexities of Celie by showing that she understood the power of nuance. When Spielberg offered her the role, she was surprised to the point where she thought she couldn't do it, but he insisted because he had seen just how uniquely she was able to combine humor with pain and insight, and that was precisely what the character needed. Number 9. Margaret Avery had to fight for Shug. While Whoopi Goldberg had a unique journey before getting the role in The Color Purple, Margaret Avery's journey was filled with many hurdles. Margaret Avery knew she wanted to be the iconic blues singer Shug Avery, but she had a prejudiced battle in the industry awaiting her. When her agent first asked about the role, he was flatly denied and told no. The casting team wanted a real singer, not an actor. However, Margaret Avery knew she had a strong connection to the character, so she refused to take no for an answer. She wrote to casting director Reuben Cannon, who allowed her to submit a taped audition. That tape audition turned the hands of fate in her favor because the author herself, Alice Walker, was beyond impressed. Walker later confessed that when Avery's audition came up, she woke up and couldn't take her eyes off Avery. Everything changed for Avery, all thanks to the tape she submitted, and also because of her persistence. What sealed the deal was the fact that Alice Walker loved every minute of the tape. However, this wasn't the last hurdle Avery needed to face. She was insecure after learning that some music legends had been considered, so she prayed for the courage to believe in herself. Things got even more complicated when Spielberg wanted her to have a body type reflective of that era. So, Avery had to gain 30 pounds in 30 days, and she met this goal through a diet change. She had an incredible journey as she nailed her role beyond expectations. Number 8. The premiere of The Color Purple was met with physical protests. As we all know by now, there was controversy around The Color Purple, and it went far beyond just the film reviews. There was also controversy that made its way to the streets. During the film's Los Angeles premiere in December of 1995, the film was met with physical picketers from an activist group called the Coalition Against Black Exploitation, or KBE, along with the representatives from the NAACP and other prominent black male figures. They all protested what they saw as a brutal and savage depiction of black men. The criticism wasn't lighthearted, to say the least. It was intensely fierce, and one columnist, Tony Brown, even called the film poison in ice cream, while a novelist called Ishmael Reed reportedly labeled it as a Nazi conspiracy. This stirred up a debate among people, spiraling into national television and talk shows such as Donahue and Tony Brown's Journal. This debate had the black community on opposite sides of the conversation. To make matters worse, this was a rough time in 1985, when black representation in mainstream film was practically non-existent. So, the fear was that the abhorrent actions of Mr. Alfred would be seen by white audiences not as the story of one flawed man, but as a stereotype of all black men. This placed an impossible burden of representation on the film and created a deep anxiety among a community starved of positive portrayals in the media. Number 7. Danny Glover's performance felt so real that he frightened his grandmother. While critics and activists went on and on about the film's portrayal of black men on an intellectual level, Danny Glover was getting an earful of personal reviews from his grandmother. It's not every day you knock it out of the park with your acting, to the point where you scare your grandmother with how real and terrifying your performance was. Danny Glover received a review from his grandmother, who watched the film and was shaken and convinced by his performance as the mean mister. She told him, "I'm gonna get a switch after that boy. He knows he was raised better than to act like that." Glover's performance and portrayal were so real that he struggled to convince her it was just acting. Ever since that day, he would bring a switch every time he went to see her, and she would playfully hit him with it as a running inside joke between them. While the story was receiving harsh criticism, this family story gave it a little more light at the end of the tunnel. His grandmother's reaction wasn't about the stereotypes or representation, but the painful reflection of a valid truth. For her, and possibly many more women who had witnessed or lived through such mistreatment, Glover's portrayal was a necessary evil and a disturbing yet authentic reflection of an unavoidable reality. Number 6. The film had a Spielberg glow. Hollywood cinematography was designed mainly with white actors in mind for many decades. This underrepresentation left black performers looking poorly lit in movies, and oftentimes it was easy for their expressions to get lost in the haze. This was a technical problem that black actors faced, and it came from a pattern of systemic neglect. Steven Spielberg noticed this problem and was determined to make sure it didn't happen on the set of The Color Purple. He told his cinematographer, Alan Daviau, "I want to see their faces." Steven Spielberg was pretty clear on his instructions, and there was no way history would repeat itself on his set. So, to ensure that the actors were lit correctly and given the same treatment as their white counterparts, Daviau used several innovative techniques. For one, he used darker set interiors and decorations to pour more light onto the actors' faces without overexposing the background. For the famous juke joint scene, the crew invented gadget lights. High-intensity halogen gloves were hidden on the back of authentic, flame-lit kerosene lanterns to provide a motivated key light. They also hid small, lightweight gator lights in the rafters to sculpt the actors' features. The Spielberg glow was what the entire innovative process was tagged with. It was a detailed attention to lighting detail, but it wasn't just for filmmaking alone. It was an undeniable act of cinematic justice, ensuring that every nuance of the black cast's robust performance was seen and heard. Number 5. Tina Turner and Chaka Khan were offered the role of Shug. Margaret Avery fought for the role of Shug, but before she did that and made the role her own, it was offered to two of the biggest stars on the planet, Tina Turner and Chaka Khan. However, they both said no to the project for different personal reasons. Tina Turner had a profound reason for not wanting to take on the role. It was because she had endured a famously mean marriage to Ike Turner, and to her, the story hit too close to home. Oprah Winfrey later recalled that Tina Turner turned the part down because she had already lived it and would not endure it again. For her, this wasn't just an acting role, it was a request to relive her most profound trauma for the world to see. The fact that she turned down the role was a lesson on the power of self-preservation over worldly gains. On the other hand, Chaka Khan felt intimidated by the world of acting in itself. At just 22 years old, the music legend confessed that she feared the process. The thought of studying and learning a script filled her with anxiety and the same dread one would have for school exams and tests. These rejections weren't just an act of preference or unavailability. They were from deep-rooted traumas and insecurity, but they also opened the door for Margaret Avery's career-defining performance. Number 14. The letters from Nettie were handcrafted. One thing that stands out about Alice Walker's novel is that it is epistolary. This means that the story is told through letters, particularly Celie's letters to God, and the correspondence between Celie and her long-lost sister, Nettie. These letters serve as the heart and soul of the story, so they were also integral to the film. While the film's production had to make many significant compromises, like softening the book's explicit nature for a more PG-13 rating, the film's art department was more than willing to fight to preserve the authenticity of the epistolary element of the film. At first, they had generic prop letters, but the art director, Gail Simon, was not impressed by them. So Simon and a colleague decided to take matters into their own hands. They took permission from producer Kathleen Kennedy, and afterward, they went to the Amblin Entertainment Studio kitchen and spent 2 days personally hand-penning the letters themselves. They wanted the letters to have an aged and authentic look, so they stained each piece of paper with a light tea solution. Whenever Spielberg came to the kitchen for a snack, he would see letters drying all over the stoves. While they could have easily used props, they decided to be meticulous. They were thoroughly committed to the novel's true nature, ensuring that the physical representation of Celie and Nettie's voices was treated with all due respect. Number 3. Steven Spielberg sacrificed his $15 million salary for lower pay. Steven Spielberg was already the legendary king of blockbuster hits in 1995, so when he decided to direct The Color Purple, it was seen as a significant career shift. This was his first truly serious or adult film, and he was getting negative pushback from people. He faced criticism, and people thought that, as a wealthy white filmmaker, he was the wrong person to tell this story. He had already considered the criticism. In fact, it was a concern he had initially. In a decisive move to prove that his commitment to the story was purely artistic and not commercial, Spielberg made a defiant statement. He waived his standard $15 million salary and accepted the Directors Guild of America minimum pay of $40,000 instead. The film's producer, Quincy Jones, later confirmed this, as he stated that the project was never about making a hit movie, but about honoring Alice Walker's book. Spielberg wasn't making a financial sacrifice just for the fun of it. It was his way of legitimizing his role and showing collaborators and critics that he wasn't there to exploit the story, but to serve it. This was a personal and high-stakes investment that earned him the right to step out of his comfort zone, and he did so effortlessly. Number 2, The Color Purple was the last curtain. Call for Adolf Caesar. The film was a catapult that launched several rising stars like Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah Winfrey. It was also the tragic final bow for one of its most seasoned actors, Adolf Caesar, a powerful stage actor who brought life to the role of Mister's cruel father, Old Mister. Caesar was a popular performer in his own right. He had just gotten an Oscar nomination for the 1984 film A Soldier's Story, and his role on The Color Purple was a means to solidify his name into mainstream Hollywood stardom. Unfortunately and tragically, just a few months after the film was released, in March of 1986, Caesar was on the Los Angeles set of the film Tough Guys, starring Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas, when he suffered a massive heart attack. He passed away shortly after, at the age of just 52. His sudden demise cast a somber shadow over the film's triumphant legacy. It served as a heartbreaking reminder of the incredible talent the world had just lost. It was even more tragic because Caesar was just about to be fully appreciated on the big screen when he lost his life. This made his haunting performance as a patriarch of pain even more cherished, as it was one of his very last performances. Number 1. The Color Purple achieved a PG-13 Oscar milestone. This would be the strangest and most circular when you think of full-circle moments. The MPAA created the PG-13 rating on the 1st of July, 1984. It was introduced as a direct response to parental outcry over the intense violence found in two PG-rated summer blockbusters, Gremlins and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, two films that Steven Spielberg himself produced. In a weird twist of fate, a year later, The Color Purple, Spielberg's next film, became the first PG-13 rated movie in history to be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture. This was the same rating that his fun summer movies had willed into existence, and it became the label that his first serious movie had achieved. This wasn't just a coincidence, but an unwavering representation of the film's main compromise. Spielberg openly confessed that he softened the book's more explicit content, particularly the lesbian relationship between Celie and Shug, because he was shy about it and wanted to secure that PG-13 rating. Ultimately, this weird footnote perfectly captures the film's entire story. It reflects how one tough decision could bring real rewards you never saw coming. The Color Purple tells the story of Celie, a young black girl living in the American South in the early 1990s. She faces terrible treatment from her father and later her husband, which makes her feel worthless and alone. Celie writes letters to God and to her sister Nettie, who was taken away from her. These letters help her express her pain and keep hope alive. As she grows older, Celie meets strong women like Shug Avery and Sophia, who teach her about love, independence, and self-respect. Slowly, Celie learns to stand up for herself and discovers joy in life. The book shows how love, friendship, and inner strength can help someone survive and heal from deep wounds. It's a powerful story about finding your voice, believing in yourself, and never giving up, even when life is hard. If you're a fan of this movie, you must have enjoyed learning new weird details about it. From tea-stained letters to public protests and private heartbreaks, these facts show that behind the scenes, stories about The Color Purple are just as complex and messy as the main story that was told on screen. These facts add another layer of authenticity to The Color Purple's legacy, making it all the more interesting. Which of these facts surprised you? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed watching these facts, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.